How would Russell Brand start this video?
Hello, you 675,000 celestial cosmic light beams of the intergalactic wonder. I'm going to try to make this video as sarcastic and humorous as possible and smile throughout the whole thing so it doesn't get demonetized, whilst tacitly perpetuating the idea that the shadowy cabal rules the world and wants to control and manipulate you for all of eternity.
Something like that. Anyways, guys, I want to talk today about why I feel this whole thing has been a little bit of a test. Okay, and I say this whole thing, I mean the last 2 years, okay? I want to talk about a lot of things, but stay tuned this weekend because we're going to be releasing a video where I interview a NASA scientist, and he's going to talk all about what the future of warfare and perhaps the not so distant future is going to look like, and you're going to want to stay tuned for that. You're really going to enjoy it. We also have a lot more winter survival stuff. We got a collaboration coming up with the Wooded Beardsman, and he's going to talk all about how to get food from nature when the shizzy hits the fizzy. And I figured what better guy than the guy who's basically eaten everything that practically walks or slithers on Earth. And I want to send a shout out to Survival Lily, who recently crossed the 1 million subscriber mark. I'm so proud of you for finally having done that. And guys, I can tell you that Survival Lily practices what she preaches, okay? I've never met a YouTuber who has been so genuine and sincere in what they represent and true to the core. Somebody I can truly trust. So I want to wish her and her family all the best, and I hope that we can do another collaboration in the future once again. And I do have a few Survival Lily Apple One knives, but they're flying off the shelves because it's one of the most popular knives in our store. And I'm in the office right now of the communist cameraman, who I think this is where he makes all his propaganda and works on his manifesto during his breaks. And if there's one thing he enjoys, it's his breaks. But I want to talk about something that's been on my mind for some time. I made a video probably about 60 some odd days ago now, which was called 100 Days Until Worldwide Riots. And pretty much since that video was released, tension has been ratcheting up as people are pushing back against these government policies. Now, I'm not here to speak to the legitimacy of said policies. Obviously, I have my opinions. I reserve the right to have my opinions, okay? You reserve the right to have your own and voice your own to the extent that these sort of platforms will allow. But for the sake of not being inflammatory and potentially creating a big argument in the comment section below, we'll just say that people are not necessarily happy about a lot of the policies. And it would appear as though with any a system of control, whether it's governments, corporations, whatever the case might be, the tendency is to micromanage more and more and more, and you become more refined in how you control things in the situation, okay? And it seems to me that this all was a bit of a test to see how far they could push the envelope until people finally push back, like you're seeing right now with the convoy and all these other protests around Europe. Some of them have gotten violent. I mean, it's gotten to the point where there was definitely some skirmishes there. Now, fortunately, it hasn't gotten to that point here in Canada where this whole convoy thing is starting. Apparently, that thing is going to be spreading now around the world. But now you're starting to see governments getting rid of the restrictions and the passports and all that stuff, which is promising for people who are of the belief that that's how it should be. And that was all kicked off by a country I would have never expected in 100 years, the nanny state, the UK. They kicked it off, which was surprising, perhaps because Boris wanted to take attention off of the fact that he was a bit of a bad boy for the last year. Possibly, but I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that, number one, it's just undeniable that the approach that they were taking perhaps wasn't as optimized. Again, some people might disagree. I personally have to share that sentiment, and I do believe that it has a lot to do with the pushback. So it's almost like they were trying to see, and when I say they, what do I mean by they? The powers that be? Okay, let's just go with that. The powers that be are always going to try to get more power for themselves because it's just in the nature of any system to try to concentrate more and more power at the top. It's not necessarily nefarious even. It's just the tendency of hierarchical systems that power becomes more concentrated at the top. So we would expect that to be the case. Now, when they seen that people were starting to push back and the juice just simply wasn't worth the squeeze anymore, that's when they start rolling back these things. Now, I would invite you to contemplate something. If we had a pandemic that was far, far worse, now that the precedent has been set, now that people have been conditioned and primed with the language and the behaviors of lockdowns, quarantines. 2 years ago, nobody knew what the hell that was. People had a totally different understanding of quarantine. For me, quarantine before this whole thing happened was a building being encircled by hazmat suits and wrapped in cellophane or something to contain whatever sort of virus was on the inside. But the definition of quarantine and lockdown, that was a term which was reserved for prisoners. And of course, people have acquiesced to that living condition at a speed which is kind of terrifying to see how quickly we just accepted it all, okay? I think that if there's another virus which is just a couple degrees warmer than this one, it's going to be a lot worse. But on the flip side of that, I do think that if there is a really serious virus, a lot of people are going to go into a voluntary lockdown. And what I mean by that is a lot of people who were highly suspicious of the virulence of this one that passed through the population and were a bit more laissez-faire with the whole thing, I think that there's going to be a lot of people who are going to be fearful of it, and the government is not going to need to impose a lockdown. Now, it's going to be interesting to see what actually happens, because we know that you can only push the envelope of control so far before it becomes severely economically detrimental, to the point where there's even nothing to gain politically. I mean, you could, if you wanted to put the tinfoil hat on, make the argument that you wanted to get rid of all the small businesses so the corporations could move there and everybody could live on universal basic income, and that way we can control and manipulate what everybody does, and we can control who people are going to vote for, because people are going to vote for the party which is going to promise them a free ride. I'm not saying that people want a free ride, but I shouldn't say it that way. People are going to go with a party who they believe is going to provide them the means to sustain themselves, essentially. And one strategy for doing that is to keep a sizable amount of the population poor and angry enough and resentful of the haves. And even though those haves might be dwindling in their purchasing power as a result of inflation and all the rest, but the idea is to keep people fighting with another. But if you get a really serious virus, and I'm talking serious, one that takes out upwards of 5 to 10% even, doesn't seem like a lot. 5% of people is a lot of people, especially when you spread that across the age groups, and it's not just the more older and infirm people who are dying, it's the the healthy people. That's when you're going to run into serious problems. And I almost wonder if, and this is just purely, this is just me shooting the breeze, right? It's a stream of consciousness, so to speak. I wonder if it was really bad, if it would even be downplayed in a way. That's the risk, is that when it's not so bad, it's like they want to bring it to a certain point to push people to see what they're going to tolerate, and then the people push back and they say, okay, well, we'll remove some of this stuff. We get it. This is how far you're going to let us go. Okay. But if it gets to the point where it's so economically detrimental that society is starting to collapse, will they downplay it? Yeah, will they say, well, it's not as bad? And will the spin be just a little bit different? It makes me wonder, because remember, when you're viewing things from the perspective of government, or you're a CEO or you're a manager of a company, you're thinking about the big picture, and you're not necessarily thinking about every individual worker's feelings per se. Like, let's say you're a general in the military and there's a private, okay? You might do something to imperil that private or put them at risk. And they might be like, oh, this sucks. But on the whole, you're trying to do stuff to minimize the total chaos. So that might mean sacrificing a few troops over here to save twice as many over here. Now, the people on the ground might not realize it. Okay, they might not know what's necessarily good for them. So from their perspective, I could see them morally rationalizing it as much as they could scientifically for those reasons. So I'm just saying that it does start to seem like we are being pushed to see what we are going to tolerate. And it's scary. And I do think that the result of this whole convoy thing, whether or not the government tries to roll back some of these mandates, which apparently a lot of provincial governments in Canada are now, because the provinces in Canada actually have a significant amount of sway over what happens. Of course, when you're talking about cross-border issues, there's less control there, even from the federal government, when it comes to crossing over into the United States. If the United States says you need this passport, then there really isn't a whole lot that Canada can do. But I do think that the result of the convoy in Canada is going to be very significant worldwide. Because remember, it only takes one country to do something for another country to try to copy that. We've seen that with Austria, where they tried to mandate the thing, and who knows if that's even going to go through now, because you have so many countries surrounding them, dropping and getting rid of these mandates and restrictions. So it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. But I do think that the result of this here in Canada is really going to have global implications in terms of not only how countries deal with the remainder of this pandemic, but how we approach it moving forward. Because if there is some kind of crackdown and there is some kind of altercation at some point, how the world reacts, how people react, how politically the deck gets shuffled, it's going to have huge, huge implications. So if you are a private, and in this case, private just means civilian, prepper, you're always wondering, what is the general up to? Because as much as you might understand the cause, and as much as you might be willing to sacrifice yourself for the general and his strategy that he's trying to employ, there's still that urge to self-preserve. And so we don't know what the general is thinking, in this case, the government, the media, the corporations who influence both of those. We don't know what they're thinking. We don't know who they're going to sacrifice, right? And no, I don't mean sacrifice in a Bohemian Grove style way, okay? Don't go there. I mean that it's a constant battle for truth. And while there is undoubtedly credible science, and we should follow empiricism to the best that our peer review system, insofar as there's still integrity in that system and it's not being influenced by greedy corporations, we should trust and follow science over whatever other sort of paranoid ideas we might have because we don't trust people. Yes, we should absolutely be suspicious, we should be critical, but that doesn't necessarily mean just as a knee-jerk reaction we think that everything is fake. That's not a good way to go about things, because that's how you're going to get burned when the real pandemic comes. Oh, it's all fake. And then suddenly you and everybody you know is dropping like flies because you based that on this whole experience that we've had here. But think about that for a second, guys. If the real zombie apocalypse happens, do you think that they would play it down, or would they just tighten the stranglehold? Because remember, they can only tighten the stranglehold so much before the economy ceases to function. Some people got to work. Fortunately, we had essential workers. Essential, I know some people don't like that word. I'm just saying it because that's what they say. We had essential workers who worked in the meat plants, who continued to go in the field and get food and drive the trucks to put in the grocery stores. We had that. What if we don't have that? What if people are too scared to go and do that? They're going to have to try to encourage people to go and do that. That's what I'm saying. Anyways, guys, let me know what you think in the comment section below, and stay tuned because communist cameraman is working on his next piece of propaganda. Stay tuned, guys. Stay safe. Thanks for watching. Canadian Prepper out.